In order to really give consideration to the Upchurch family and all of its history in America, we need to stop occasionally and think about the colonial Upchurches. That is to say, who were the Upchurches that we had to deal with during the colonial period up until the time of the Revolution. So today, let's take a look at one of the four individuals who headed branches of the family in the colonial period. They were great-grandchildren of Michael Upchurch I, who came to America from England in 1638. When we want to start talking about the Upchurches of the colonial period, the first thing I do is go to the biofile for the individual involved. So I have here the biofile for Michael Upchurch III. He's XID 159. And in this biofile, there are entries of all the information I've gotten from all the cooperators and all the information I could find in books about Michael Upchurch III. We have tens of thousands of these biofiles, and they represent an interesting starting point when you are giving a little talk like this about one of your ancestors, or if one is writing a book. Let's think about Michael Upchurch III and where he fits in the family. He is a member of the fourth generation of the family, and there were only 4 members of that generation that produced offspring. So here we're talking about the 1/4 part of the family that served as a head of a group in the family, and we call the fourth generation members heads of branches. In this case, we declare that Michael Upchurch III was head of the Brunswick branch of the family. Let's take a look at the Virginia chart, which shows where the Upchurches were located in Virginia at various times. And we start out with Surry County, Virginia, which is where Michael Upchurch I came in 1638, and he lived there until he died in 1681. And in fact, I think his son, Richard Upchurch I, who was the only one that we know of that produced offspring, also lived and died in that county. Pretty soon, though, the descendants of Michael Upchurch I began to move south and west in Virginia, and for most of the 1700s, they were located in Brunswick County, Virginia, which you see here highlighted with a little arrow pointing to it. We are disappointed that the history books do not tell us more about the Upchurches in Brunswick County, Virginia. We know, in fact, they were there, and if we dig deep into the records, we will find that evidence. But it's up to us to sort of bring that forth and tell the story. And so today we will tell more about Michael Upchurch III and his existence in Virginia. The ages at which these descendants of Michael Upchurch moved about were such that probably Michael Upchurch I did not get to know his great-grandchildren. So Michael Upchurch III, who was born in 1728 in Brunswick County, Virginia, would probably have never known his great-grandfather. He died there, and that is to say, Michael Upchurch III died there in Brunswick County, Virginia, in 1795 at age 67. So he occupied the middle part of the 1700s, living all of his life, so far as we know, in Brunswick County, Virginia. Now, in order to have a better look of how he fits into the Upchurch family, let's take a look at the 5-generation chart, starting with Michael Upchurch I and going down through the generations. And we've highlighted here the descendants of Michael Upchurch I that lead us down to Michael Upchurch III, his great-grandson. And we see there he is considered as head of the Brunswick branch of the family, one of the 4 branches that I mentioned, and you can see those 4 branches on the chart. We also note that Michael Upchurch III had 4 children listed there: Elizabeth, George, Sherwood, and William Upchurch IV. They were heads of clans, and we'll deal with them individually later. There were more Upchurches there in Brunswick County, Virginia in the 1700s than just this Michael Upchurch III. So we have to be alert as we look at the records to see how those fit into the picture. In telling the story about Michael Upchurch III being a member of the fourth generation of the family, we can best turn to some illustrated examples of this individual, and we are very fortunate to have a number of excellent citations of Michael Upchurch III, which serve as bedrock information for us telling about the family and knowing that they existed at a certain place and at a certain time, and that we knew about their ancestors and about their descendants. So let's take a look at one of these. For example, the military service of Richard Upchurch III. He was of the right age to have served in the military, and he started serving in his middle years along about 1750, and he in fact is well recorded as having served. So the particular distinction that brings to us is that any descendant of Michael Upchurch III, descending from any of these four children of his that I mentioned, would be entitled to be members of the Sons of the American Revolution, SAR, or the Daughters of the American Revolution, the DAR. A lot of people place great importance to this, and we're happy that these records exist. I'll show here just one of several charts I have, is actual military records coming from the War Department, which are official records. And we've got several of these sheets which show his actual entry at a certain point in time and place. This particular record shows him being on the muster roll in June of 1778. So you see, that's right in the middle of the Revolution. I have here, taken from his biofile, a letter written to me on the 25th of February 1998 from cousin Eleanor Louise Baker, who made a summary of all of his service. And I would say, looking at this, there's probably 15 entries which show proof of Michael Upchurch III serving his country in the armed services. So that's one aspect of his life and that we draw information from. Let's take it another, which is actually the will of his father, James Upchurch I. Provides some very interesting information. It says here that the will was of his father, James Upchurch I, was probated on the 27th of May, 1765, and that he listed two individuals, his wife Elizabeth and his son Michael. Now, and he declares that Michael is the youngest of his children. So whereas he does not list the other children, it tells us that he did in fact have other children. Another interesting aspect of this listing is that rather than using the spelling Michael as we do today, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, the spelling used was M-Y-A-L. I've also seen it as M-A-I-L. In those days, in the colonial period, people took a lot of liberties with how they spell names. The will tells other information. In particular, it mentions 200 acres of land that James Upchurch had acquired, and he gives this to his son Michael. This 200 acres figures into our calculations several times. First of all, when James I bought it, and in this case, when he's passing it on to his son. And he tells us something about where in Brunswick County he lived. He says this land is between Thomas Brace's line and Benjamin Mosley's line. He signed this will with his X mark, and also he shows people that witnessed the will: Absalom Ledbetter, Benjamin Mosley, and Isaac Mosley. Now, these Mosleys were close neighbors of Michael Upchurch III, but in fact, the Mosleys married into another part of the Upchurch family, which was not even part of this branch of the family. So there was more than one branch of the family represented in Brunswick County, Virginia, and we'll go into that in more detail at some other time. Let's take another look at the 200 acres and see what else we find in the way of information there. I had mentioned that this, in buying this land, James Upchurch I, the father of Michael Upchurch III, bought this on the 27th of May in 1762. And at that point in time, it was described as being in the southern part of Brunswick County, near Lizard Lick. So that's another bit of information which is very solid and good for us. The way Olive Morgan in her Upchurch story tells this, it says that Michael Upchurch III inherited this land and that he sold it in 1793, but the deed is not recorded. It says it was found in the loose deeds of Brunswick County for 1732 to 1780, marked October 26, 1795. So we're indebted to Olive Morgan for getting that bit of information for us. Now let's take another look at information. We actually have records of the estate sale for Michael Upchurch III, and our records show a listing of what he owned. And in those days and time, they tended to list in their will fairly minor things because they really didn't have a lot of worldly possessions. So first on the list is 8 hogs and 8 shoats, a shoat being a small hog or a pig, 1 cow and 1 steer, 1 horse bridle, a parcel of corn, bed, 1 bed and furniture, 1 saddle. It even goes so as far as down to say 1 pot, 1 pan, and 1 skillet. So if you didn't really have much, you thought you ought to list everything you could. The total of this came to 40 pounds. Of course, they were using the British monetary system at that time. This is, again, some hard evidence for us, telling us about the estate of Michael Upchurch III. Now, there's another category here we'll talk about, and these are odd references. As you study a person like Michael Upchurch III, you come upon additional information that you have to fit into the picture someplace. Now, some of the information we have comes from a professional research that was made by a professional genealogist named Nancy Carter Moore, and she was employed by cousin John Reed Upchurch, who was a descendant of Joseph Upchurch, born about 1775. Now, we never have figured out who the father of Joseph Upchurch was, but cousin John Reed received contributions from several of us to do research on his family. Sadly, John has passed away. He was a very interesting character. He was a member of the CIA, which I never learned a lot about it. But this is sort of a recap of some of the things that this professional genealogist learned and reported to him, which John Reed shared with me. And it says, she says, from wills and deeds, I know that Michael Upchurch lived on the south side of Eaton's Road in 1784 near Middle Run. His neighbors were Valentine White, Thomas Parham, Louis Dupree, Thomas Isaac, and Benjamin Mosley. And now here comes the puzzle. In 1777, the records show that Michael Upchurch III had a neighbor by the name of Bartholomew Upchurch. And I'm sad to report that we do not know much about Bartholomew or how he fits into the family. That's a great puzzle, and we'll keep that name in mind and hope that someday we'll come across information that will tell us more about Bartholomew. This record goes on for several interests to tell about different things. We learn about Michael Upchurch III. So I report to you here in these various citations some very significant information that helped us create the framework of the Upchurch family. As a matter of fact, it was created before I got into the act by people like Bill Luda West and Olive Morgan. We're forever indebted to them for their contributions, and I've enjoyed telling you a little bit about this branch of the family, and we look forward to hearing about more later on.
Thank you.